emotionally, I was, suffice to say, I was very bitter. I was very bitter at Christianity in general. I was very bitter at church. I was very bitter and resentful towards Christians. So if you were a Christian, you were not somebody I wanted to hang out with, which is really interesting because I continued to attend church. So it was kind of a glutton for punishment, I guess. But I would sit in church and I would stew, and I would think, these people are arrogant. They're self-righteous. They judge me. They judge what I do. They judge the people I hang out with. They judge, the way I talk, maybe the way I dress, whatever. And so I was very resentful and bitter, and not always pleasant to hang around. And so, as it was at this cabin, and we had this cabin on up at Hadron State Park. If some of you are familiar with that, on Lake Chocolate, which is the southernmost tip of the lake. And so I was up there doing my darndest to make these people feel like I felt. And went away from the weekend feeling just emotionally exhausted. I think my wife and I both were just like, I'm just exhausted. And I'm sure they didn't feel all that great either, because I really did my best to stick to them. And but it was probably within a week after that Labor Day weekend that something changed, and I was telling Barry it wasn't anything magnificent. There was not a bright, blinding light. There were no angels that visited me. There was no audible speaking in my ear. There was nothing grandiose about it. No life or death situations that suddenly converted me. And I don't want to say convert, and I don't like using saved, because that would imply that I was seeking this, and I wasn't seeking anything. I literally just woke up one morning and I had this huge burning desire that I had to read the Bible, and not just nitpick through it. I had to read it from cover to cover. And I had 5 Bibles on my shelf, but I felt like I had to buy one. I don't know why. But I went out, so I bought a new Bible, and I started reading it, and that wasn't enough. I had to consume book after book, written by different pastors. I would download sermons on my iPod and listen to them at work. I drive garbage trucks, so that's 8 to 10 hours a day of driving, and so I'm listening to this stuff, and I get paid decently for it, so that pans out really well. That point aside, so I'm just consuming all this information, and I'm thinking, and part of me didn't want to say anything to my family, because I'm like, oh my God, this is embarrassing. I just made these people feel terrible, and now here I am, I can't get enough of it. And so over the course of 3-4 months, I kept thinking, what is this about? What is this for? I can't go on just consuming all this information and sticking to myself. And we continued to go to church. And but I felt like there had to be something more. And while I was speaking with my stepmother, and she said, well, do you remember Anna Allen? And I'm thinking, yeah, I do. And I think it's been 15 years or something since I've seen her. And she's like, well, her and her husband Barry, who I had no idea who Barry was, they're going to come up to Moscow and start a church. And I played it off like, oh, well, that sounds pretty interesting, and that, I might have to look into that. But I mean, it really was just like a ton of bricks. Like I instantly knew right then that this is what I've been preparing myself for, or actually, this is what God was preparing me for. So like I said, I had no choice in this matter. And this wasn't like a friendly invite, like God saying, hey, I'm going to throw this thing out here, and if you want to be involved, that would be great. Check it out. And if you don't, whatever, go back and close yourself in your room again. And it wasn't like that. It was like, here's this thing, and you're going, and you don't have much of a choice. And it's really interesting that that the Lord would send Anna, because I knew her several years ago, and she was one of these Christians that, to me, just had it together, And she was an amazing athlete, and I remember thinking, what Christians like Anna, I was like, what are they getting that I'm not getting? And but she was so gracious, and we talked a couple emails, and I'm still bitter. There was no internal change other than I had to read the Bible. There was no internal change. I was still very bitter towards Christianity, didn't want anything to do with the church. And so it was as if God took all these contradictions and conflictions in my head took them out and put them in Barry and Anna and said, you need to make a church, and it needs to be like this, you know. And so, I mean, still listening to them today, there's nothing they have said about, this is what we want Intersect to be about, that I've gone, not really pertaining to me. Everything's like, yeah, that's exactly how I feel. You know, they're like, the church for people who don't like church. And I'm like, that's me. I don't like church. You know, I'm here telling you, I'm a messed up guy. I'm not a big church guy, okay? And, but, you know, this was just something I didn't have a choice in, you know. I didn't seek it out, I didn't ask it. God just came down and, I mean, literally flipped a switch. You know, it was probably like, I'm sick of you wasting your time, you're wasting mine. Threw the switch, and so here I am, and, you know, just talking with Barry, the important thing, I think, to take away from this, if anything, is that I'm a messed up dude. You know, I mean, I'm sure there's worse people, I'm not saying I'm terrible, but, you know, I mean, you know, I'm not the most friendly of people at times. You know, I'm not a polished Christian, you know. If I had the money, I'd glitter my body in tattoos, maybe some piercings, I don't know. You know, I drink, you know, sometimes maybe more than I should. I regret it the next morning, but I do it anyways. You know, I've done the smoke thing, I've done the drug thing, you know, I've been down that road, you know, and, you know, I'm a messy guy. But that, I didn't have to get right for God to say, I'm going to involve you in this. I'm a messy dude. He didn't make me, you know, he didn't come down and say, I'm going to make you perfect in the course of 2 years, and then you're going to be okay to attend this church. He said, you're a messy dude, and you're going to do it anyways, whether you want to or not, because I don't want to. I don't want to stand up front today. But I'm just telling you know, the pie was good. And so here I am. But anyway, so that briefly, without getting too crazy, that's how I came to be here. So